if you're not on Twitter, or certain segments of Twitter, I guess I should clarify, you may not have seen this, but it was a bit of minor drama over the weekend. Uh, Twitter user Morgan Harris. I don't know who they are. I don't care. Uh, Apparently they are a college student at Emerson College, and they signed up for a queer studies class. Now I want to be clear here: queer studies, LGBTQ studies. So this is a course on the history and culture of the LGBTQ uh, culture and um, the struggles and the history of this, all these the various things that have gone into the modern queer society. Nothing, as far as I'm aware, according to this queer politics class, uh, nothing about this indicates there's any kind of racial bias or specificity to the class. It's not a black queer class. It's not a Latin queer class. It's not a white queer class. It's just queer politics. So on August 28th, they tweeted out, I just saw that my queer politics class is taught by a white man. I'm going to go through all of the required readings, and if there isn't at least one black author, I will be calling him out on the first day of class. Okay. Now, I want to say first off that I think that it is a very good idea to include uh, BIPOC works in queer studies. As some people pointed out in the comments on this uh, tweet here, uh, the queer culture, queer society, whatever you want to call it, took a lot of cues and lessons from the black community. It makes sense. The gay rights, queer rights movement started shortly after the civil rights movement for black people, for minorities, racial minorities, had kind of, let's be honest here, kind of petered out. We got the Civil Rights Amendment, Malcolm X and uh, um, MLK had been killed. While not all of the goals had been accomplished, enough had been to pacify enough people, at least for 30 or 40, 50 years. So I totally understand uh, expecting black voices to be part of this study, and I support that, and I think that's a good thing. All that being said, uh, so on the 27th, which was, what was that, Friday? Time has no meaning for it. Thursday. So Thursday, they tweet out this, that they're going to call out their professor on the first day of class. Then on, this would be Saturday, they posted this. Please read my professor's email. Hi, Morgan. Thank you for reading the syllabus and thank you for your message. Of the 6 assigned books for the course, 3, half of them, are written by non-white authors. Unruly Visions includes works by diasporic authors, including black writers. Cruising Utopia is a decidedly Latin text. And A Little Gay History refers to a worldwide selection of mostly non-white examples. There are also references to black queer culture in Impossible Dance, Queer Styles, and Queer A Graphic History. You're right, none of these books are written by black writers, but I think black queer culture is represented in these works. I don't believe that black culture is only represented by a black author. To me, that is a very limited view. Now, this is something that a lot of people have an issue with because They seem to think that the only way to get an accurate view of a culture is by someone within the culture. And while I do believe that we should center, for instance, Black voices in discussion about Black culture and Black history, that is not the only way you can get that. And in many cultures, there aren't very many or any good representative authors to provide that culture, to provide that information. And once again, this is a queer politics class, so there's no centering BIPOC authors or what have you. Seems to be somewhat like it's just identity politics trying to find a problem with the syllabus. There will also be several films by Black artists, including Watermelon Woman and Paris is Burning. I may also screen Tongues Untied if we have time. I myself regret that there's very little representation of socioeconomically challenged queer folk, though Paris is Burning is a good, if limited, representation. By its nature, a syllabus is exclusionary. The professor often must make difficult decisions, but I am happy with the syllabus. It is imperfect, but it does its best in terms of representation of minority cultures. But that said, my first priority in devising a syllabus is not representation of minority cultures. The priority is to assign readings that I want students to read according to my purposes as I imagine the course to ideally be. That is a task that only the professor is tasked with and qualified to do. If you're dissatisfied with the syllabus, I suggest you drop the course. Best, Michael. So, what's wrong with this email? If you want to be a tissue paper sensitive little woke scold, a lot, and if you're not interested in being a woke scold but are still tissue paper sensitive, then if you're dissatisfied with the syllabus, I suggest you drop the course is a little rude or what have you. And they posted yesterday that they have a meeting with the dean and the professor today on Monday. So I'm sure we'll get the update on that as it happens. But this is a little ridiculous, isn't it? Like, again, it's a queer politics course. So talking about the politics and history of queer people in society, and the professor seems to have done quite a bit to include non-white perspectives in that. 3 of the books are written by non-white authors, so that's some pretty good shit. And they've acknowledged that there is a good deal of a need for non-white representation in this discussion. What this feels like is just liberal idpol run amok, talking about how we need to raise up black and brown voices to, which I agree with generally, but I think to ignore white voices to try to claim that we need more representation is also just as idpol and wrong. I mean, this is just a ridiculous discussion. Now, when I was in college 15 years ago, we didn't really have these kind of queer politics classes, at least not at the school I went to. Of course, it was a pretty conservative, private liberal arts college, officially affiliated with the Presbyterian Church. Now, the Presbyterian Church, from my understanding, is a little bit more progressive than most. It still was pretty conservative for the time. Now, that said, that's not to say that there wasn't, you know, it wasn't. I went to school in 2005, so the world was a vastly different place. Pride was not the major idea that it is today. There wasn't a great deal of um, support for these kind of ideas on like there is today, like we enjoy today. And it's worth noting that a decade after I left school is when gay marriage was legalized. So this is just completely unreasonable. And also, the author here, or the professor, seems to be very cognizant of the idea that they need to they need to at least have perspectives of non-white queer people in this queer politics class, and so they did. So I would assume from the little information available here that the professor is probably pretty progressive, probably someone who is very supportive of the leftist, or the queer agenda, very supportive of these kind of things. But the this kind of behavior, this kind of call out, is not something which supports these kind of professors. It's not the kind of thing which will allow more progressive professors to continue teaching these kind of classes and educating more people on the kind of things. Because, to be perfectly honest, it seems like this Morgan, I assume their name is Morgan Harris. I don't know. I don't care. This Morgan is already pretty knowledgeable about queer politics, already well versed in the history of queer people. Let me check out. Yeah. I mean, not that they need to put everything like that in their bio. I don't know if they are queer, or if they're just very very queer friendly. Whatever, doesn't matter. It's cool. But when you call someone out like this, when you assume, and this tweet right here, just saw that my queer politics class is taught by a white man. It's clear that from the beginning, they were under the impression that this was not going to be a fair interaction. That their assumption here, right from the start, right from the very beginning, is that it's being taught by a white man, and that makes it automatically wrong and bad. And while I don't want to get into a whole big thing about how white men are discriminated against and assumed to be lesser and blah 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 blah, that's stupid as shit. I do want to say that when you center when you go to a class on queer politics, and you assume right from the off that since it's taught by a white man, that there's going to be something wrong with it, that's on you. Now, yes, there are a lot of white men who will teach these classes and do a very poor job, uh, either because they are incredibly overtaxed adjunct professors who are also teaching 12 other courses and don't have time to devote don't have time or energy to devote to properly overseeing this kind of class, or because they don't care about queer politics. But the fact that she thinks that this very reasonable email explaining that we have plenty of, or we have a good amount of non-white representation in the syllabus is it it's not a good thing, and it's actually, I think, a little bit I feel like I could make a case for this being anti-intellectual, because it presumes that white men are incapable of teaching something like this. Like, she doesn't know. Dude could be gay. Dude could be trans. Does she know who this person is, or anything about them? I don't know. One of her other tweets, she tweeted the guy's name. I don't care to dig into his history to find out if he's actually a gay trans man, who was at Stonewall, or anything stupid like that. Because ultimately, what we have here is someone who is trying to make a queer politics class which should celebrate the diversity within the queer culture, the queer um, demographic. There's another word that is completely escaping me right now, um, which the queer community. That's why was that word so hard for me to remember? Words are hard. The diversity of the queer community, and he's doing that. But they're trying to. I'm going to get a little edgy here. They're trying to erase white queer people. Like, given that I think I've seen recently that approximately 60 or so percent of queer people in America, and since America is the only country in the world, the only one that matters, are white. Having half the syllabus being written by non-white authors, and uh, centering and admitting in this email that non-white authors are important to the history of queer culture, I think that this is doing harm. Now, I want to make it clear here that if you have a shitty professor who is not being reasonable and is not telling people truths, is not properly centering, like if this had been a black history or black politics class and they weren't, I would totally find it reasonable to say that if not all, then the vast majority of a syllabus should use non-white, black or brown works for a black politics class. Perfectly reasonable. And similarly, it's interesting that none of the complaints here are about the, claiming that the syllabus uses non-queer authors. Again, this is an essentialization of race in this discussion, where race only plays a small part, given the problems that queer people have faced over time. Over the last 40 or 50 years, since they started to really make moves for themselves. Now, all that being said, the this centering about the white male is also a bit of an issue, because unfortunately the vast majority of professors are white men. If Magmill's in the audience right now, I'm sure he will back me up here. That thanks to the way that uh, our society socializes men and women, the vast majority of college professors are white men, because white people are the ones who are have the resources and inclination to go to school to become a college professor. Remember that generally you need a little more qualification to be a college professor than to be a high school or lower lower teacher. And men are more socialized to be in these higher education roles. It's kind of funny. Uh, my perception is that women are elementary and maybe even high school teachers or middle school teachers, but men are high school and college teachers. Which obviously there's nothing either biological or emotional or psychological to back that up. That's pure socialization and how people are what people are taught as they're raised. There's literally nothing uh, making that like unalterably true. But that is the perception, at least my perception, and I assume the perception of other people. So this idea that just because it's a white man in charge of this class means that there's something wrong and that there needs to be a call out. It's just toxic and not good for our goals, for the goals of queer people, the goals of leftists, the goals of progressives, whatever word you want to apply to this, because it's not good. It creates a toxic environment where people who may share your goals and ideals are afraid to speak out because they'll be dismissed for something they literally can't control. Like, I can't control that I'm a white dude. Sorry. I was born that way. Literally born that way. Now, it is up to me and others like me to make sure that we do our best to get to get information outside of that experience, outside of um, that history. Make sure that we have all the information so that we can uh, be so that we can be the advocates and be use our privilege appropriately, as they say. Use our privilege to help people. But this automatic dismissal of white male voices means that you're going to and I don't want to get into the kind of thing where I've seen a lot of people talk about how well, you need us white men to advocate on your behalf, because I think that's toxic and stupid too. But I think especially when you're such a minority as queer people are in the United States, that they probably don't have the support to throw away uh this is an Ed Marquis stream, Ruby Aries, sorry. They don't have the power to throw away supporters like this. Now, that's not to say that they should be indiscriminate about who they accept as supporters, but I don't think anyone can afford to just I figured, Ruby, it's all good. That they can afford to throw away supporters who are as reasonable and rational as this. Like, this is someone who is justifying their choices on the syllabus. True! It's true, Ruby. Justifying their choices on the syllabus and explaining why these are good good examples for the exact thing that this Morgan had an issue with. And yeah, sure, go ahead. Uh, and this it's just not good. It's toxic. It it doesn't look good to the liberals, which I'm not saying we need to pander to liberals or anything stupid like that, but if you the liberals are most, and now I'm assuming this more is some flavor of progressive, or I don't even need to justify my belief that they're progressive, but I'm assuming there's some flavor of leftist, just by the attitude presented here. But I could be wrong. We know they're a progressive of some sort, politically speaking. They may be a lib, but this doesn't look good to other libs. I mean, I suppose there are some idpol poisoned libs who will latch onto this kind of thing. But it's just toxic and not good. So yeah, don't do this shit. This doesn't help. This doesn't help queer people. It doesn't help black or brown people. It's just it just makes you look better, and scores you woke points, which are not useful for anything off of Twitter.